We're going to talk about an introduction to C programming and how you can use the Valgrind tool to detect memory errors or memory leaks in your program. So first is an outlook of how you compile a C program. So this is basically your file name, and this is basically the flag that tells you the name of the executable. And if you don't give the name of the binary that it generates, it automatically creates with the name a.out. So now we will look at the a tool Valgrind. So Valgrind is pronounced as a it's grind as in tint. And so first, how Valgrind can help you is this is the way how you run the Valgrind tool. So this is your executable that we generated in the previous slide, and this is the Valgrind command. Once you install the Valgrind, so you can simply call this and it will run the Valgrind tool. So common problems with C programs are, they have lots of memory leaks and memory errors, and it's very difficult to debug them. Things like segmentation fault, you actually don't know what's going on, but still you have just one simple keyword, that's segmentation fault. And this is where Valgrind comes into picture. So first we'll talk about what is the difference in malloc and versus calloc. So malloc is basically, it dynamically allocates memory, and those all memory locations are uninitialized, and the calloc, after the allocation, it initializes those memory location with 0. So this is one of the example how Valgrind can be used to detect errors in your program. One of the example case here is we often try to read or write past the end of the array. So what happens is usually in a C program, you might get a segmentation fault, or it might happen that program just behave weird and you don't get any errors. So this is a common example here where we have allocated memory for 10 arrays, 10 elements, and what we are doing here is actually we're trying to access more than 10 elements. So that's the reason, because the 10th element, the element as index 10, has been allocated a memory in the malloc, and that's why you will, if you run a Valgrind tool, it will tell you it's an invalid write of size 4 because it's an integer of 4 bytes. And it's an invalid write because you haven't allocated memory for that particular element. So how Valgrind help is, we talked about, it lists you the errors, it tells you the file name, and it also tells you the line number where this error is coming from, and it also tells you the function name.
So does it even tell you that if, let's say, you're writing outside the array but it's that memory is still allocated to the program, so does it still give you an error?
You mean it's allocated to some other program?
To the same program, but it's not in the array. Like array is of size 10, but you're writing at the 11th element, but that 11th element is assigned to your program.
No, it won't tell you.
Process. Okay.
It won't tell you. Those are some drawbacks. So another example is when you are trying to read an uninitialized memory, the memory which is not initialized. So for example, in this program, we have again the same funda, like we have 10 elements, and we initialize every element with an integer, and now we are trying to kind of create sum of all of it. And so if you look at the 10th index, it's like we haven't initialized it, but we are trying to sum it. So if you look at the Valgrind tool output, it's something like it's telling you uninitialized value was created, and it points you to all the the file names and things like that. So I will just skip. Yeah, thank you.